Well, welcome everybody. We have about 53 people in the room and it's slowly starting to build. We'll just give it another 30 seconds while I set up social media on the other side. And if everyone just wants to, if you want to grab some paper and pen to the participants in the session, in case you want to take some notes, we'll start maybe posting contact emails as well in the chat, and that way it'll keep us engaged. And while we're at it too, maybe we'll start a poll just asking everyone who's in the room, what type of therapy are you most familiar with? So we'll start off with that poll just to get an idea of where people's knowledge is and comfort level and talking about therapy, because some of the people in this room are registered psychotherapists, and we'll be talking about some of the strategies they use with their participants. So I will just launch the poll now, and you should see that on your screen. If I can get the assistance of the panelists to give me a thumbs up saying, yep, I see it on my screen. Great, and you can participate as well. So if everyone could just click on what is the type of therapy that you are most familiar with, and you're probably only allowed one response. So if you could just click in, and then we'll share the results on the screen while I'm trying to set up our lovely social media screen.
You know, it seems like there's a lot there for anybody listening, and yet, you know, there are so many other types of therapeutic models, and more and more and more all the time. In the last 5 years, there have been so many things that are coming to the forefront, and it's quite incredible.
Beautiful. A few more seconds to set up social. All these little clicks that need to be done. Copy link.
We're all just thankful that you're doing this, Marina.
Can everyone see the results of the poll on your screen?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
Nope. Not yet.
I see one.
Results. Here we go.
Oh, there we go.
Great. So welcome to the Coping with Trauma Symptoms panel. I have some wonderful guests here today who I will be introducing shortly. We just started off with a poll. So most people seem to be familiar with cognitive behavior therapy at 54% or 26 participants in the session. We're now at 69 active participants joining us through Zoom. And we also are live broadcasting to our social media channel. So if anyone's watching out there on social media, you want to share the links, please feel free to do so. You're helping us to spread awareness about the work of the Gatehouse and the work of these lovely folks on the screen who will be introducing themselves shortly. And let's just take a look. Client-centered came in second, and then some, oh, no one said regression. Interesting. I've heard a lot of good things about that type of therapy as well. And we're going to talk about, and logotherapy is something that people are usually not too familiar with. We'll talk about that as well. And mostly are familiar with that person-centered therapy and cognitive behavior therapy. It has been widely proven successful. There's one thing to note about therapy, if you're looking for therapy, is that it's an individual process. I'm just going to stop sharing results and close the poll. It is an individualized process. What works for one person may not work for another. So you really have to ask some really good questions of your psychotherapist to see if they are the right fit to work with you and your history as well. So my name's Maria. I'm the Executive Director at Gatehouse, and welcome to the session. I'm super excited to be here. I have a whole bunch of lovely people here with me today. Thank you to everyone who's here in the chat. We are now at 79 attendees. And if there are questions to ask, you can ask questions in the chat, and I will try my best at the end to bring them to the facilitators here today, who will try to answer your questions as best as possible. If you want to share comments of gratitude, those are always welcome too in the chat. That would be great. And again, on our social channels. I'm going to turn it over to Deb Maybury, who is a registered psychotherapist, who will be sharing a little bit about what she does and what some of the work that she's involved in. So we'll start off with Deb today. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, the timer has been started for 15 minutes. I had a teacher one time that said I was delivering too much information to my martial arts students in self-defense, and I always thought, well, if I have an opportunity, I'm going to share as much as I can. So I'm going to be speaking fairly rapidly. I'm going to be reading some notes, and I'm also going to slow it down so you can apply a little bit what I'm going to be talking about today. And we can't see you, we can't see your reactions. So we'll do the best that we can to connect with you. I'm speaking for the others, but it's like I see you all looking into the camera. Okay, so my notes. I believe that education is the key tool in order to facilitate healing. We're all here in therapy or at the gatehouse looking for a feeling. We want to achieve a certain type of feeling. What we're feeling is not working, and it hasn't been working. And that's why we're seeking another perspective. So Maria alluded to it. There is not one therapist that is suited for all different people. And there's not one therapist that's suited for you the whole time. We go through different changes in our life. We need different perspectives. We need different types of modality to activate different things in our mind, body, and our spirit. And also, we need someone to challenge us at different times. And what I mean by that is challenge your false beliefs, because we all have false beliefs. And sometimes they're so ingrained that we don't even realize they're false. They've become our reality. And we need to shift those in order to grow, in order for personal growth. So I graduated in 1988 with a degree in psychology. And at that time, I knew there was no way I was ready to sit and hold space, sacred space with people. And I didn't even know who I was really. And what I knew is that I felt the sense of feeling alone at different times. And I wasn't alone. I was in a beautiful relationship at the time. And I didn't know me. And I needed to activate the me. And I think that's a very important thing in therapy. It's just not dealing with the pain, but it's finding the heart and the love, the person that you are. And I believe that there's a combination of that going, the polarities that were pulled back and forth. So what I did know is that I had this sense of wanting more, wanting to know more. And I wanted to be educated, but in a different way. And that's called life. So I went on a spiritual growth, personal growth journey, sweat lodges, rebirth, all these things I didn't know that were healing. I didn't know that I really was in pain. Really, it was so far buried. But I did fire walks. I cycled across Canada, made connections with different people. I was doing a lot. I was seeking. But the thing is that I didn't know that I really needed healing. Begs the question, if you have resistance to healing, right? If you are sabotaging, can you heal? And I really do think that you can. It's much easier when you're in a supportive environment, meaning you know you need support from yourself, self-love, self-understanding. Let me jump somewhere. 10 years old, little Debbie Maybury. I was adopted. I grew up in a home where my parents were fighting for the first 6 years, a lot of battling back and forth. And then we moved. By the time I was 10 years old, I was violated by 4 different people. Again, that's where the aloneness started, the isolation, the pulling in. But here's a key. A key on my journey was I actually felt I had some control. There was sometimes a sense of being trapped in a situation, but I felt like if I said, "Mine," I never told, heaven forbid, I never told what happened to me to anybody. There wasn't that training ground of communication in the family. But if I said, "Mom, I don't want that babysitter didn't come back. If I said, "Mom, I don't want to go there," I didn't have to go there. So my resiliency, my control was a foundation that led me to believe that I could take care of myself. Now, in some ways, that's a good thing. And in other ways, it's not such a good thing. But I did feel very alone. When I was 10 years old, something significant happened. And this is what led me to be a spiritual psychotherapist. I had a vision. I was starting to steal. I was freaking smoking at 10 years old, right? We almost set the forest on fire with matches, playing with matches. I was crying out. I was hurting, but nobody knew that. And that's probably what happened in most people's lives. People don't know that you're hurting, but there are signals. And that's part of a therapist's responsibility, is to find some of that and unearth that and water it and nurture it and together and go in a different direction. So this vision was, you be good. It was an energy. I was above my body. I won't go too much into it. I'm writing about that in another book that I'm writing. But thank goodness it happened, because it shifted me. We all need a shift in perception in order to heal. That was the starting of a healing journey. So in 2015, after years of being a graphic artist and real estate investments and all kinds of things, and I knew I was ready to go back to school. I turned down a master's. I was accepted to do a master's in academic world. We need that, I believe that, but it wasn't for me. I needed to combine the mind, the analytical brain, the narrative. I needed to connect the body, very physical. Like I said, I cycled across Canada, martial arts training for like 30 years almost now. I needed that physique. I needed to know the science in my brain. I needed to understand that. And I needed the spiritual component. I'm a soul. Is there meaning behind what happened to me? What's the purpose of what happened to me? Who am I? So I believe in my practice, and this is why I do this. It's a combination of everything, the subconscious, the unconscious. So I incorporate all different aspects of the self into the practice. What is your reality? What is not your reality? What's your soul journey? Do you believe you are soul? Do you believe you have a journey? And it's not religion, by the way. Okay, spirituality is just a sense of something else, universal intelligence, oneness, meaning. So I incorporate that into what I teach. My main teachers, I'm doing great for time. My main teachers I'm going to share in just 1 minute. But I want to share something else that happened because, again, it shifted my life and it brought me to the gatehouse. In 2011, I was lying in bed and I had achieved all the goals for that year. That year, I read 75 books. Is that anal or what? Okay. But I wanted to learn. I was seeking biographies, all kinds of books from other people. I wanted to learn. I was lying in bed and I was saying to the universe, I am ready. Why am I doing all of these things? These sweat lodge. Why did I cycle across Canada? Why? And I said, I'm not going to stop until you tell me. And oh my God, I started to have flashbacks. Anybody had any freaking flashbacks? Well, I had never had flashbacks. And by the way, push your belly out and breathe in through your nose. Release through your nose. Drop your shoulders. Breathe in through your nose. And do this for me. Just touch on the sides from your shoulders down to your elbows, slowly. Breathe in. Push your belly out and exhale. Calm, quiet, and peaceful. Draw an 8 on your palm and switch and settle into your chair and be calm. And you can continue that if you'd like to. That night, those flashbacks took me back into those moments of childhood that I had not visited in more than just memories. My body was engaged in the experience. I was sweating. I was panicking. I felt emotional pain. Even now, I've got little, you probably do too. Breathe as I'm talking about this. Continue to breathe through this. This is my experience. It doesn't have to be yours. Smile. It's my experience. Okay? The narrative, my experience. Deb's experience. That night, well, it's right there somewhere. Unlock the Door was birthed. I had a vision, another vision that night, and I have many of them. It was to write that book about healing from sexual abuse. I didn't plan this journey. This was a complete shock. I got up that night. I was bawling, projectile crying. I wrote out the story I'd never written out before. The power of sharing the story, the power of finding the right therapist that you can share that story with. It's going to hold that space and acknowledge you, right? I wrote that, and that took me to Arthur Lockhart and the Gatehouse, and Maria was just a itsy bitsy little person there, not the whole, the main runner, the executive director. I went to the Gatehouse. I took the phase 1 and immediately did the facilitation. I'm in group, I think it's 23, so 25, because I did phase 1, 2, did a whole bunch of things. What I learned at the Gatehouse, and this is such a huge part of coming together with people that can say, me too. You know what? I learned I'm not alone. I learned that what happened to me is real. I learned that the community can sit together and hold space for each other. It was such a powerful moment for me. So I'm going to give you an example, because how much time do I have, Marina? My thing jumped. I just have a few minutes left, I believe. So what I want you to know is that you are not alone. And even though we feel it sometimes, we're not alone. What has happened to us in trauma is there an area in the brain, in the amygdala, that's been activated and encoded with trauma. The neurons have fired together. We hear this: fire together, wire together, sync together, link together. And it's a damn good thing that it did, because it was protecting us. It was helping us. It was assisting us. But when we get to a place years later, the amygdala doesn't have a timeline. So it doesn't know that little Debbie, the last time she was violated was 47 years ago. So if something comes up and I haven't depotentiated, separated, or broken that link, it's going to activate. I'm going to feel that in my body, my mind, spirit, everywhere. So havening is something that I do. Spiritual technology is another thing. That's oneness, meaning, making sense of it. But the havening is, I just want to give you a quick demonstration on havening. Is that okay? Great. Thank you. Okay. Havening activates delta waves. Just do this with me. Let me take off my glasses. We touch this area of our face. If you're activated now by what I've said, just breathe in, sit in your chair, and relax. The delta waves are safety waves. The second place is down the arms. I did this before. Could you tell me, when you go to the produce section, how many yellow things do you see? Oh, bananas, peppers, squash. Switch to your hands. Everybody hum with me. Row, row, row your boat. Go back to your face. You get the idea. Repeat after me. Calm. You can close your eyes if you want. Peace. Clarity. Understanding. Gratitude. Switch to your hands. Kindness. Gentleness and love. What havening does is it distracts what is active. So we activate the pain, the trauma. We depotentiate it by asking a series of questions, and I've hardly gone into it at all. I'm going to leave it there, but what I will say to you is this. I'll put my, I don't know if you've listed that, Maria, deb@debmaybury.com, debmayburytherapy.com. Wednesday night at 6 p.m., I'm going to do a special Zoom room. So if you send me an email, put Gatehouse in the subject line, deb@debmaybury.com. At 6 p.m., I'm going to go into a little bit more depth and see if it's havening is something that you're interested in. Actually, I'll do it Wednesday and Thursday in case we have male, females in group. 6 p.m. If you're interested in that, let me know. Thank you, Maria, so much. We've got an amazing group of people here, and I'm going to switch it over to Kathleen. And namaste.
Thanks, Deb. So, Catherine, are you good to go next and talk about relational psychotherapy? It's a new term. When I saw your advertisement, I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I'm excited to hear about that and what that means for people and what type of practices are involved. Thank you, Deb.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Deb. That was amazing. I thought I really liked those exercises. And one thing I might add to the bag is the one that I do sometimes is to just try to feel the grooves between your forefinger and thumb and just breathing. And so that helps me to ground myself, and I can do that anywhere, you know, on the subway surreptitiously. Sometimes you don't want to be, you know, like doing this in public, but I just kind of do that just to ground myself. So I'll just add that to the bag of tricks, I guess. Thanks so much for asking me to be part of this panel. This is my first time speaking publicly about my experience, so I wasn't really quite sure what to expect. So I thought I will talk about relational psychotherapy. I'm currently a therapist in clinical training, but I thought maybe it may be most helpful if I shared a bit of my story and then answers any specific questions people may have at the end. So my name is Catherine, and I'm a first-generation Korean immigrant. When I was 9, my parents thought it was a good idea to move from Seoul, Korea, to Calgary, Alberta in February. And that is a trauma, I confess, I've yet to fully recover from, but that's besides the point. I have a wonderful husband and 2 amazing kids. I love hiking and biking, spicy foods, and I'm on a personal mission to bake the perfect sourdough bread. I'm also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. My abuser was my father. He died by suicide when my brother later confronted him. I've never spoken publicly about that. It was a secret I kept in deep shame for nearly 3 decades. I still still emotional, as you can hear. I coped by, sweeping it under the rug, because in my culture, in my family, that's what we did. And in fact, I did my best to pretend, it didn't matter, not that much anyways. And if anyone broached the subject, I swept it further down the rug. I built a fence around it, sat on it. And I was this wall of self-defense that you just couldn't penetrate. And I told myself I was just fine, and it just kept telling myself, and I soldiered on. And I'm sure many people who are here probably can relate. And I just suppressed those inner demons, I denied my trauma. And I got pretty good at it, thanks to years of practice. And, from the outside, I checked all the boxes for an enviable life. I had a good job as a broadcaster. I had a beautiful family. I had a nice house, an active social life. But in all honesty, I was deeply unhappy and angry and stuck. Yes, fine. Someone just posted something. I was stuck in this very unhealthy cycle of denial, which would periodically explode in rage and usually ended up hurting those I loved most. And this would be followed by periods of deep depression. And yet I kept telling myself I was doing great, I was fine. And then it was only when I experienced a public online shaming over something I wrote that matched my inner shame, I completely came undone. So I fell into this deep depression. I hit rock bottom. And then I realized I needed some help. I needed to heal. I needed to face my trauma head on and really start my healing journey. I should mention here that I had paid lip service to therapy and support. In fact, after my father died, I went to 1 survivors of suicide loss support group, 1, and then I was like, I'm sorted, I'm done. So yes, my denial was very deep. Luckily for me, 3.5 years ago, I found my way to the Gatehouse, first as a participant and then as a peer group facilitator, and it changed my life, knowing that I wasn't alone in my childhood trauma, and thanks to the wonderful resources and support I received, I was really able to begin my healing journey. Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, says, deep listening is the greatest gift we can give someone else, another person. And through that deep listening leads to understanding, and that is the pathway to love. And I really found that's something I found thanks to the Gatehouse. And then starting the journey, I learned to recognize my old ways of coping. Deb mentioned this, they weren't working anymore. They were fine when I was a child, but it wasn't working as an adult. In fact, it was getting in the way of people, hurting people I loved and standing in the way of my peace of mind, my full potential, and my true happiness. And it was far from smooth sailing, I assure you. My healing journey would lead to a loss of friends, nearly cost me my marriage, and even led to a career change. But thanks to my wonderful therapist, a meditation practice that keeps me grounded in the present, stopping those dissociative moments, the support of my family and a few good friends, and in no small part to the Gatehouse, I was able to let go of my rage, my guilt, my shame, and replace it with compassion, forgiveness, and kindness. I mentioned before, I'm currently a psychotherapist in training at the Toronto Institute of Relational Psychotherapy. And relational psychotherapy is premised on the fact that, it's our relationships, be it intimate, familiar, communal, and especially the one you have with yourself. These are the keys to happiness. If those are going well, you feel good. And at the end of the day, I think we all, as simple as it sounds, we want to feel good. And now I'm now helping others to heal, to find their potential and their peace of mind and their happiness. And words cannot describe how I feel at the fact that I'm now using my trauma and transforming it into something that can be of service to others. To make sense of all those years I suffered in silence makes me quite emotional, as you can hear. It's just it just blows my mind. I know and I believe we are resistant, and we do possess the power to heal within us. And we don't have to do it alone. That's why therapy and the Gatehouse are here. We're not meant to do it alone. And I stand here virtually before you all as living proof of how we can transform trauma. Thank you so much for listening to my story. And I just wanted to leave you with this quote from the American poet and civil activist Maya Angelou, which I just love. And I think Maria's gonna try to cue it up. So I just love this. She says, I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. And I really love this quote. So I offer that as a gift. Thank you so much for listening to my story. And I guess I will pass it up to Sheri.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much, Catherine. I appreciate that. And I've been part of Catherine's healing journey. We've gotten to facilitate some meetings together, and it's an honor to be on a panel like this. So thanks so much, Maria, for putting all of this together. It's a lot of work to do. So I'm very blessed that, I've gone back to school in my 50s, and I just recently got my certification and qualified to become a certified addiction counselor. I've also just gone to Laurier and finished some coursework doing CBT. So it was nice to know that that one's one of the more popular modalities. I think I like it because it's evidence-based. It's very structured. Therapy. I'm not a person who, wants somebody, in therapy for life. To me, I need to give you some solutions to be able to apply them in your own life. And I love the title of this conference. It's called Transforming Trauma. So I'm going to kind of give you a brief rundown of how I transformed my trauma and how I ended up becoming an addictions counselor. So just to put it out there, I will be 10 years sober on February the 6th of next year. And that's been certainly a journey for me when we're little girls and growing up, or little boys, or we're growing up thinking, you know what, I never at 5 years old went, I want to grow up and become an alcoholic. But unfortunately, that was my journey. And I came by it honestly. I grew up in an alcoholic home. That's not what made me an alcoholic by any means, but it certainly kind of set the pace. And, I was well aware of what alcohol could do. In grade 2, I always tell this story very candidly because I do believe it was a pivotal moment that changed my life. And I just remember, we went out for dinner one night, and my dad used to like to drink a lot at dinner time. And I remember my parents had this huge fight whether or not I could bring my little doll into this restaurant. My little doll's name was Sweet Connie, and she came everywhere with me, and she's my protector. And my parents got into this huge fight. Could I bring the doll in the restaurant? And for some reason, Mom didn't win too many of these fights, but that night she won, and I got to bring this doll in the restaurant. And I just remember, you know, even at that age, this was in grade 2, I remember my dad getting very loud, very belligerent, and we were asked to leave the restaurant. And the next thing I remember is that I was dropped off at an aunt and uncle's that night with no explanation. And all of a sudden I have no mom, no dad, and no explanation. And I just remember sitting in a very dark room in a rollaway bed, thinking if only I hadn't brought this doll into the restaurant, none of this would have happened. But later on, of course, in my adult years, I was to find out that my dad's alcoholism had driven my mother into what was then called a complete nervous breakdown. And she was hospitalized. And, you know, back then they hospitalized them and drugged them and did all kinds of treatments and things like that. So I was pulled out of everything I knew for about a year and with no explanation. So as you can imagine, that certainly manifested my journey into some huge trust issues, huge abandonment issues. And then later on, my uncle ended up molesting me. So this was a pivotal moment that wrote on the slate of who I was to become. And I always describe that experience as it left me feeling dirty in places that soap doesn't reach. So moving into my adult years, I knew there was something, I just couldn't put words to it. And it's like Deb was saying, and Catherine, like we grew up in a generation of don't talk, don't tell. So of course, after that, I was put back into everything I knew again, because I guess my mom decided she couldn't leave my dad at that particular moment. So she did the best she could, put the family back together. So I always say I learned to lie at a very early age. And the two biggest lies that I have told myself my entire life are, I'm fine and I don't care. And that was me. If you had to ask me, oh, what about that childhood stuff? That childhood stuff doesn't matter. That's fine. You know, and I always say in my adult years, I was held together by tape glue and a smile. Like if you say, how are you? I'm fine. I'm great. Right. You know, nails, perfect, hair, makeup, everything's on point. But inside I'm dying and I have no idea what I'm dying from. At the age of 13, I take my first drink. You know, I always kind of joke with people, like when your first drink is a purple Jesus, if anybody knows what that is, it's overproof alcohol and grape Kool-Aid. I was left in a park by my so-called great friends. And, you know, chances are I wasn't going to grow up to be a social drinker with an experience like that. And I love this stuff. What it did, it's wrapped itself around every one of my nerve endings. Now, you got to remember the lies I told myself then. I'm just a partier. My dad's an alcoholic. I'm a partier. So the denial of my addiction ran very deep. Had I seen probably a proper therapist and gotten help at that stage, it would have been completely different. But of course, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to medicate all these emotions. I end up having a series of toxic relationships. Now I call them hostages, but at the time I would have called them relationships. I truly thought I was in love, but you know what? Two broken people don't make a whole. That's why I do think relational therapy is such an important piece to anybody's healing journey, because we need to learn how to be in relationships. And I was so broken and I didn't trust anybody because of these experiences. And I just thought, you know what, once I get the marriage, the 2.5 kids, the house, the car, and the career, I'm going to be fine. And I got all those things. And I can't figure out why there is this God-sized hole in my soul that nothing fills. And I'm addicted to everything under the sun, you know, but I always say the first thing that I was addicted to was your approval, and I would do anything to get it, you know. So I had to look at these behaviors when it came to my own addiction, like people pleasing and resentments. And, you know, whenever I talk to anybody that's dealing with substance abuse, we kind of say resentment's a number one offender for us. And there's a saying, and I forget who said it, I should know this, but because I use it all the time, but they say resentment's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Well, my dad and my uncle were long gone, and I'm still blackout drinking, binge drinking like crazy, and reliving and refeeling. That's what resentment means. It means to refeel old anger. So until I got kind of a handle on those sort of things in my healing journey, I was never going to heal. And the biggest piece of my journey, and I know the Gatehouse touches on it so beautifully, and it is to me, the pivotal corner for my healing, was forgiveness. And I always say forgiveness is giving up the hope that my past could have been any different. Forgiveness does not mean what was done to me was okay. Forgiveness doesn't mean that I'm ever going to forget it. Forgiveness means that I love myself more than I hate what they did to me. Forgiveness did not change my past, it changed my future. And the cornerstone of forgiveness was accepting the apology I never got. And once I said, and that's all easy to say, but it's when it has to drop from your head into your heart. And we always say the longest 12 inches is from head knowledge to heart knowledge. And I knew when I had a genuine, heartfelt forgiveness. I knew when it didn't own my soul anymore. But this was a journey, and I needed to get sober to even tackle the trauma that was in my life. And I always say we got to get down to the causes and conditions of our addiction, because it's like the iceberg, right? 9/10 of it is below the surface. So 1/10 is just my drinking and my addiction. That's my solution to my problem. So drinking wasn't the problem. That was the solution to all of that underlying trauma. And until I started to unpack that, which is when I finally became, healed through my own journey, that's why I ended up becoming an addiction counselor, because I really believe as an addiction counselor, my lived experience is one of my greatest assets, because people understand that I've been where they've been and I've gotten out. And it was through, work and, like I say, therapy. And I got sober in a 12-step program of recovery. And it's like Deb was saying about spirituality. I'm not a religious person, but I'm a highly spiritual person. And my spirituality has evolved over the 10 years that I've been sober. And it's been an amazing transformation. And I've worked in some of the leading treatment centers in Toronto, and some of them are 12-step based, and they do wonderful work there. And I would say many of the clients that I've dealt with have a history of childhood sexual abuse. And I'm going to read something, because I think Russell Brand, if anybody's familiar with Russell Brand, yep, Maria's nodding, says it much better than I ever could. And he says, trauma is the gateway. Cannabis isn't a gateway drug. Alcohol isn't a gateway drug. Nicotine isn't a gateway drug. Caffeine isn't a gateway drug. Trauma is the gateway. Childhood abuse is the gateway. Molestation is the gateway. Neglect is the gateway. Drug abuse, violent behavior, hypersexuality, and self-harm are often symptoms, not the cause of much bigger issues. And it almost always stems from a childhood filled with trauma, absent parents, and an abusive family. But most people are too busy laughing at the homeless and drug addicts to realize your own children could be in their shoes in 15 years. And that really resonated with me. And that's a good part of my journey, because I believe that I've stopped the trauma cycle. I have a beautiful daughter. She'd kill me for talking about her, but I always call her the healthy, well-adjusted, non-alcoholic version of me. Kids got more letters after her name than the alphabet, and she's a good soul. And I believe that if I hadn't done a lot of work surrounding my own stuff, I could very easily have passed that on. So I'm super grateful for the journey. And it's like, both Deb and Catherine were saying, the only reason that any of this makes sense to me is that my experience has to mean something to someone else. And when you can use it in a way that you don't stay a victim to your trauma, but that you become a survivor, that you become an inspiration to others, is the reason that I do this. And I do believe, that there's concurrent disorders, depression, addiction, childhood sexual abuse. There's a whole melting pot of concurrent disorders that we have to treat simultaneously. And, obviously I deal with the addiction piece, but of course I always unpack trauma. It's just part of it, because if not, I'm going to go back out and I'm going to use, whatever I'm addicted to cope with the trauma. So it's really important to get down to that. I know that when we were emailing back and forth, I was asked, to just give a few strategies to coping with addiction. And there's so many of them, but I believe, like, obviously a 12-step program is probably one of the initial peer support, the biggest peer support kind of model there ever was. And I always tell people, we are a peer support. So there's a lot of very well people in there, but you have to beware. There's some people that aren't as well as others. So again, it's a matter of, just observing people's behavior. I always tell people if they are going into a 12-step program to observe, but that's where I found huge amounts of healing. And that's why I love being a part of the Gatehouse, because we all have lived experience. But just to share a few coping tools specific to addiction. I mean, obviously, if you're trying to get sober, you need to prepare your environment by removing all the items associated with addiction. Ask for help. I didn't do it alone. I don't credit my sobriety for doing it alone. I tried for years to put it down. And what happens is I could put it down for a bit, but I could never stay stopped. There was always some rationalization or justification that will lead me back to a drink every single time, and some of them were very flimsy excuses and, like, oh, it's Friday. That was one of mine. It's the weekend. And eventually it was like, okay, I woke up. So, you have to really kind of keep in mind how the cycle of addiction works, and it's progressive. It never gets better. It only gets worse. But asking for help was huge. Another thing that I tell my clients to do is inspire yourself. So I tell them to keep pictures of people that mean something to them right on the back of them, why you're staying sober, for your children, like carry them around, keep them close to your heart. Because I always say with addiction, it's the only disease that'll tell you you don't have it anymore. It's like, yep, I see a lot of people relapse because it's like, yep, I've got some manageability back in my life. I've got my job back, my family, things are going good. I can have just one, and then I see them back again, downward spiral. So, it's about being honest. And I always say this when I speak about recovery, the biggest mind altering substance is the truth. And if you don't find your truth, and if you don't speak your truth honestly, then nobody can help you. Until I was ready to admit that I needed help and that I had a problem with alcohol, no one could have helped me. So it's about really the honesty in that. Talk to somebody that you trust about your feelings. Again, you don't have to share on panels like we are here, but you need to find that one trusted person in your life. And I guarantee you can find them at the Gatehouse. Turn to somebody, trust them. Believe me, we get it. We understand. Another thing, learn how to set boundaries. You have to say no to protect yourself. I needed to say no to people that were, going out and leading that lifestyle. I had to make a lot of major changes in my life. I couldn't just put down the alcohol. I needed to change circumstances, friends, people. Journal, that's another great tool. A weekly planner. I drank a lot of alcohol when I was bored. Housework was always extra exciting when you're drunk cleaning the house. Must have been awfully clean. I think I was seeing double, but anyway. But it's about, not being bored. So whenever I'm dealing with clients, I'm like, here's your weekly planner, build in some meetings. If you're going to meetings, keep that all in one place. That way, if you get a craving, you're going to look at that calendar, go, you know what, I should be in a 12-step meeting. I should be doing this. So that's really important. Of course, self-care is a huge thing for all of us. And sometimes we as counselors aren't the best at our own self-care, but we're great at preaching it. So I really try to be mindful, because if I lose my sobriety, I'll lose absolutely everything, and I can't afford to lose that. So I think in order to achieve long-term sobriety, what the goal is to be emotionally sober, which for me means to create a meaning and a purpose in my life, which I think to me is a central theme in what all of us have been talking about. And I always say there's 86,400 seconds in each day. And in each day, I need to find a purpose. Time is really the only true currency that we have. And I believe that my purpose is to help people recover from addiction and trauma through my lived experience. I was a child that grew up being told to be seen and not heard. And places like a 12-step program and the Gatehouse have given me a voice and a life beyond my wildest dreams. And I live in gratitude for that life every day. So I pay it forward. And I'd just like to close with this little poem that I found. And I really think it's meaningful. And if you can live your life like this, then to me, you're living a good life. So I'll just close with this. Imagine there's a bank account that credits your account each morning with $86,400. It carries over no balance from day to day. Every evening, the bank deletes whatever part of the balance you failed to use during that day. What would you do? Draw out every cent, of course. Each of us has such a bank. Its name is time. Every morning, it credits you 86,400 seconds. Every night, it writes off at a loss whatever of this you failed to invest to a good purpose. It carries over no balance. It allows no overdraft. Each day, it opens a new account for you. Each night, it burns the remains of the day. If you fail to use the day's deposits, the loss is yours. There is no drawing against tomorrow. You must live in the present on today's deposits. Invest it so as to get from it the utmost in health, happiness. The clock is running. Make the most of today. And thank you so much for giving some of my day purpose by allowing me to be here. Thanks, Maria. Thanks, panel.
Thank you so much, Sheri. One of the things that I should have mentioned at the beginning as well is to have a Kleenex box nearby. I've had to use it already a couple of times. Thank you. Wow, I'm super emotionally moved right now by everything that everyone has shared. Getting some really great gratitude in the chat. Thank you, everyone. Definitely that comment about looking at your emotions and your feelings, and a lot of us may be guided by our feelings or become overwhelmed by them, and this is where numbing comes into play, right? Trying to suppress emotions of guilt, of shame, of vulnerability even. So thank you so much for bringing those themes in, Sheri. Catherine as well, your vulnerability to share your story, and you as well, Sheri and Deb, thus far has been quite courageous and very encouraging. Thank you for giving the gift of yourselves to share with other people today here through Zoom and through our social media channels. I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, our mindfulness meditation guru, who will share a little bit about herself and then maybe take us through a practice.
Please bear with me. I just had my heart broken open 3 times, and I didn't know that we would have time to talk about our personal experiences, but I see how valuable that is and how integrated you all have made yourselves so that you are really living that healing that you're also offering. And I am just so thankful to you because you remind me why I'm alive. This is where I want to be. I always want to be in this much truthfulness and courage and wisdom. I don't remember what I was going to say. I feel like I want to say, first of all, my story is in the October newsletter of the Gatehouse. And so much of what you've already said resonated. I didn't come to the Gatehouse when my sister first told me about the Gatehouse. I had an opportunity to go and start my healing. But my response was, oh no, the Gatehouse is going to want me to forgive people, and the Gatehouse is going to want me to make other people feel good about what they did to me. And I'm never going to go to the Gatehouse. And then my life was shattered when my husband left and had 2 13-year-old children. And there was that, I think what you said, Catherine, the shame or the pain was so, it so matched the pain I'd experienced as a child. I was suddenly reliving the trauma all over again, and I was completely shattered. And that's when I was willing to go to the Gatehouse and get some help. So what I experienced at the Gatehouse actually fits with what I wanted to say, because my talk is about mindfulness, and within mindfulness is a loving presence. It's about being with ourselves and what occurs inside us and watching what happens, thoughts, feelings, sensations, with attention. And that attention is not a neutral kind of attention. It's not a scientific observing kind of attention. There's a compassion that arises with it when we are willing to be present with whatever is going on inside us. So I actually first learned this at the Gatehouse from those people around me who could offer that. And through that, I was living in Calgary at the time. I went home to Calgary. And Catherine, you know what that's like, right? So I was bringing that kind of loving attention to myself that I had experienced at the gatehouse as best I could. And allowing, for the first time, allowing whatever came up in me to be. And this was so very liberating. And Sheri, I think this touches on what you were talking about. To just not be putting all my energy into that mask that I had worn for decades. And I had created a mask and a way of being that I thought could be acceptable and lovable. And then not only created it, but then pouring energy into maintaining it. And I had absolutely no energy left over for my authentic self and the truth of me. So mindfulness is very liberating for me in the truth-telling part of it. And the slowing down of mindfulness to find out what's going on inside is helpful in terms of strategies and coping with symptoms of trauma, in the sense that we start to feel that in any given moment, when we slow it down enough and see what's going on, there are options available. So we can potentially sometimes intercept that runaway train of the addiction habit, or the negative thought habit, the self-sabotage. And it starts very small. It's not like we become aware and then it ends, but every now and then you can intercept and maybe slow down the process, or maybe even prevent it that one time from taking over. And you get more and more skilled at this, I suppose, the sense of being awareness, that constant that sees what passes through. And we start to understand, oh yeah, all that passing through isn't our essence. Our essence is this loving presence that's deeper, or that's like the sky overhead, and then the clouds come through, and that's all the stuff that changes all the time. So that's a benefit there, but it goes, for me, that's very helpful for dealing with symptoms of trauma. But mindfulness has been about healing the wound itself for me. So it's that developing the loving presence to be with myself, surrounded by love, and it's love that I generated, is when that really starts to change the wounded place, and the wounded place even becomes a place of power, because the more we bring light and love to it and let it be whatever it is. And something I like to say to myself is, tell me more, Andrea, tell me more. Whatever it is, if it's a shame that comes up, or because that's the last thing that and it's the most important thing. That's what I needed to hear as a child. But I always heard, don't think that way, don't dwell on that, stop telling us that, be different, change. So for me to tell myself, tell me more, and allow my shame to tell me all of its aspects, and to be natural and to be beautiful, and to be a very important part of being a social being is to experience shame. One moment. And Deb, I think you were talking about all those coping strategies having been helpful, and they were needed for us to be safe. When you start to have compassion for all parts of this, these things that we did to save us in the moment. It can even come to the point where you start to feel gratitude for all parts of it, because it got you to now, got you to here. So we probably don't have a lot of time. I wanted to tell you also, I bring mindfulness to healing horses, and this is really important to me, and I've done this with gatehouse participants, and they can access their healing energy, even those people who've had no experience with horses, or with body work. It's in us, and this is exciting to me because we were wounded in touch, and our healing potential is in touch. And of course, and when we give healing to another, we are the first beneficiaries of that energy. It comes up and through us to do it. And that is transformative. That is so powerful that the place that we were so injured could have this power, and that the power is love, because we sometimes think power is, we associate it with abusiveness. So to feel it as its rising life force, growing, healing, learning, loving energy, that is, that's where I always want to be headed. And I really want to be headed there with all of you, because we all have so much to give each other. How's our time, Maria, for doing a little meditation?
We have about 4 or 5 minutes, so we can do that if everyone's okay. A 5-minute practice.
That's everyone. Oh, okay, we're good. All right, let's get comfortable. Lie down, sitting down, and let's bring our hands into it. Massaging or rubbing the hands together to get some heat, and then massage your face, your cheeks, wherever your hands are drawn to travel to. And then up to the scalp, fingertips on the scalp, either just holding or moving your fingers in little circles to massage. And then bringing the hands to the heart, so one hand on top of the other. And feeling into your breath and the movement of breathing. And feel your hands moving with the breath. And notice where you are being held by the earth, your contact with grounding, so sitting bones or feet, or if you're lying down, your whole body. And with each exhalation, see if you can settle into that contact a little deeper. And as you inhale, let your heart open any amount. And exhale, just letting go of any tension, anything that doesn't serve you in this moment, just letting it fall away gently. And now imagining someone you love, looking at somebody you love with your eyes open, and what would have to happen in your eyes to look lovingly into your beloved's eyes. This could be a child or a pet or someone no longer alive. Just imagine your eyes looking lovingly at them. And then imagine touching them gently, maybe holding their hand or shoulder, forehead. And if it's a pet, scratching in just the right spot. And then notice and feel what happens in your own body as you imagine this scenario. And then sending a message of thanks to your heart for opening up to this little practice we've done together. And then gently returning to the Zoom room, place your hands on your lap or sides, and slowly open the eyes and coming back. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thank Thank you so much, Andrea, for that. I always love doing those meditations as a participant. Your voice is so soothing. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. It is now 2:01. We've allocated 10 minutes for questions and or comments if you want to share in the chat or the Q&A. Beautiful. And I had in the Q&A, Carla mentioned community mental health therapy. So Carla, if you want to type in a little bit more in the chat, or you were just adding to the list. And for those out there, I know that in the community health centers, I was fortunate to do my practicum at LAMP Community Health Center over the past year. And we at LAMP, they do offer free cognitive behavior-based and solution-focused therapy up to 10 sessions with a registered social worker. So there are free therapy options in the community, and some have gone to remote service either over the phone or through Zoom as well, just to provide additional support. If you're looking for therapy, maybe you can refer some of your clients if you're working in the field. I know the community mental health centers have those kinds of resources available. Beautiful. Okay.
Could I just share too? You know, sometimes people just don't have the finances in order to get therapy, whatever type of therapy is, and that is super unfortunate. You know, OHIP will cover things related to our body and not our mind, and to me, it's so inhumane. Another place to look at maybe are various schools where they offer different type of therapeutic modalities. Like I went to the Transformational Arts College. And one of the things we had to do was everybody had to acquire 125 hours, and 90 of those hours had to be free, right? So you're going to get somebody who's just learning, but sometimes there's just that opportunity to share, and maybe that will, you know, lead you into another direction. So often different schools, Maria, I think you encountered that too, right? We all have to get hours for what we have to develop and practice. So you can look in that way, as you know, in that direction as well.
Thanks for sharing, Deb. I actually had a question that I can respond to, but I want to hear from the panelists and your experience as well. So Kathleen was asking how to identify the boundary of sharing too much personal experience with your clients. And she's currently a school counselor for teenage mothers. So how do you recognize what's appropriate to share and not to share as a practitioner? Whoever would like to share your thoughts on that, and I can speak to what our lovely school says about that.
Okay, well, I'll go if everybody's. Let me start it off. I think it really depends on who that client is, first of all. Right? Healing is about the connection, but you only share when it truly serves that other person. And I think it's important to share, you know, small amounts. It depends on the different type of therapeutic work that you're doing as well, right? So there are a lot of different factors, but really, if you really consider what is truly serving the other person, the me too, to me, in spiritual psychotherapy, you can't say enough about that. You know, I'm not going to work with somebody who's suffering with addictions. I'm going to send that to the person to Sheri, and Sheri can say, me too. Like, you know what I mean? So you really have to be cautious. With kids, sometimes I've shared, you know, with a 17-year-old, yeah, you know what, I kind of don't know what you're feeling, but let's just say it's been there. So a little bit versus somebody else, you know? So it varies.
Thanks for sharing, Deb. Sharing, Catherine, in your own practice, do you have any comments about that? Like in terms of how do you know when to share with clients and when not to share?
Yeah, that is a very good question. And the answer is really, it depends, I think. You know, it really depends on the client and your relationship, where you are in your therapeutic relationship. It may not be something you might disclose right away, but I hate to be vague about it, but it really depends. But you just have to, as a therapist, you have to just keep in mind that that space is really for your client. So you don't want to take anything away. That is their time. But if it feels like, especially with something like childhood sexual abuse, I know firsthand how relieving it is and supportive it is just to feel like, oh, I'm not alone, because it is a shame that is so secret that so many of us have kept for decades. So when it comes to childhood sexual abuse, you know, I know how healing that can be, to have that, yes, me too, I get it. And yet at the same time, you got to balance that out with making sure you have that space for your client, because it is really about their healing at the end of the day. But whatever, if you feel like it would help them on their journey, then I say yes. But again, it depends.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with, you know, what both Catherine and Deb are saying. It's certainly an individual thing. I worked at a treatment center where the counselors were all required to have lived experience. So anybody coming into that residential treatment center knew that every counselor had lived experience. It's like you say, we're client-centered. So as long as, you know, it can't become about my trauma, it has to be about the client. My general rule of thumb that if I do self-disclose, it's about the nature, not the details. So I might share a general overview of the nature of what happened, but I'm certainly not getting into any specifics or details. But I do find that it can really speed up sort of the therapeutic alliance when somebody knows that you have that lived experience. So that's been my experience with it. But yes, I know that the colleges all have wonderful rules for this. So I'm going to pass that one over to Maria now.
Thanks so much. Yeah, ethical standards, and I don't represent any of the colleges, but I am registered with the Ontario College of Psychotherapists myself as well. And we only share what would benefit the clients, and we have to be very careful. If it doesn't benefit, if it's benefiting you, and this is where supervision comes in handy. So if you don't have a supervisor already and you're out there, you know, or you've already done your qualifications, you're out there, you got thousands of hours under your belt, but you are a human being, it's always good to seek supervision and support. If you find yourself talking too much about yourself in a session, that is a warning sign that you need to talk to somebody as a professional to see what's going on with you, that you are mostly benefiting maybe from that session as opposed to your client. So to be aware of that, is it helpful? Is it going to, if it's going to harm the client in any way, then you do not share it. So if your client is sometimes persons, and this is one area that I've worked with, a borderline personality spectrum or borderline personality disorder, it might be too much to share a lot of your story with them. So just to keep that in mind. And it's not, if someone is in a very deep depression, it might not be helpful for them. It just depends on where they're at. And I love that where you are at in your therapeutic alliance also factors into that, definitely. Let me just check. There was one more question that we might have time for here. And okay, so what, if any, kinds of immediate trauma support would you recommend for someone working on a sexual violence crisis line? It depends. I know that if you can maybe elaborate on that, the person, I can't see your full name on the chat. If you can elaborate a little bit more on that question. In terms of immediate support, I know here in Toronto, there's the 211. If you're looking for and the e-mental health website, you can definitely find supports through there. But I'm not sure if you mean for clients or for yourself, or if you're working with people. Let's see. Okay, so working with Women's Support Network. Great. So definitely e-mental health is a great website resource to provide to your clients to look up other mental health resources. Again, the community health centers have free counseling. You might be able to connect somebody with a social worker that they can get some free counseling. Deb mentioned the schools, a lot of post-secondary or graduate students in the counseling field trying to get their hours, and they are supervised by qualified supervisors, and it is a highly structured program. It's not, I know a lot of times people may make assumptions about students, and like, yes, they are inexperienced in certain ways, but this is another way that they could get access to some support. So I hope that answers your question. If not, please feel free to just clarify a little bit more for us. That would be helpful.
You know what, and when you're working on any type of a crisis line, it is so important that you're always doing your own self-care. You can have one session that can be so incredibly disturbing, And remember, you didn't sign up to be re-traumatized again. So when you're working in these types of on these types of hotlines, in these types of situations, you want to make sure that you've really done your work and really done a lot of processing and integrating. If you've had those types or similar experiences, and know when to pause from those and to revisit your own healing again, and make sure, like Maria had said before, it's so important for us to have supervisors. And listen, kudos for anybody who's working on those lines when there's acute trauma and you know, in terms of sexual violence, domestic violence. That takes a lot. It takes a lot of courage to do that, and it can really erode a person's spirit very quickly. So self-care is so critical. Thanks for the question, and you know, really reach out for that type of support, whether you know it's some of the things that Maria asked, or for you know, individual therapy, just to process, just to let that go, get outside, breathe, look off into the horizon, breathe the air, go hug trees. And you know, it sounds like fluffy unicorns, but it's really not. It's really getting grounded again when you've had that type of experience or phone call.
I love that, Deb. I actually hug trees, as someone else told me that's a very therapeutic thing to do. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go try it. Since we are situated on a park, I went to hug a tree and I was like, this looks so weird right now, but whatever. And it actually felt really cool to get out of the gatehouse. You know, I hear one year I did almost 200 intakes myself. And I'm like, okay, I need a break. And I went outside and I hugged the tree. I'm like, okay, so-and-so said this would be a good experience for me. This is totally different. I would never do this. So I went and did it. And I'm like, I don't care how silly I looked. And I was like, you know what? I'm just thanking the tree for being here, giving us life, giving us oxygen. And it was such a cool mindfulness-based experience that I will never forget. So thank you for mentioning that, Deb. Someone else had a question for Andrea. Do you have a website about your Healing with Horses program that you were starting up out there in Port Hope?
Oh, thank you so much for your interest in that. And the answer right now is I don't, because I need to find a space where I can practice this. This was at a barn where there was a lot going on all the time, and it was very disruptive. And I'm still on the lookout for a place to do this. And I will, of course, have information on that. The moment I have it, you will know. It'll be on the Gatehouse website and in a newsletter. And really, thank you for your interest. I also wanted to say about creating safety in yourself. Maria, when you're talking about hugging a tree or being like on a crisis line and needing to come back to yourself and make a safe spot for yourself, just finding where you feel comfortable in your body. We're not used to finding comfort there. So to go into wherever that is and let that feeling radiate. Enjoy, feel into it, learn more about it, can create some safety right there on the spot.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Andrea. And thank you everyone for being here. And thank you to all our amazing panelists for being here. This is such a wonderful event. Having this trauma conference or transforming trauma conference go live on our social channels, live here on Zoom, and interacting with over 80 people in this session alone. Thank you everyone for being here today. If I didn't answer any questions and you have a question, you can definitely email me, maria@thegatehouse.org. My email is on our website, thegatehouse.org, as well, under the Contact Us section. And we look forward to seeing you all later. If you're coming to the art therapy session at 4 o'clock, please bring paper and pencil, crayons. We're going to have fun. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Live your best life. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.